Good day viewers, welcome to another edition of the Daily Strange Stories. I'm John Brown. I hope you've had a productive and fulfilling week. Now, let's dive into the strange and unusual. Our lead story for today: G20 Summit, the secret agenda the US doesn't want you to know and the truth about Trump's boycott. In the shadows of global power plays, where the world's most influential leaders gather to shape the future, a hidden agenda lurks beneath the surface of this year's G20 Summit. As heads of state prepare to meet in Johannesburg starting tomorrow, the United States stands accused of trying to silence voices from the global south, pushing back against priorities that challenge its dominance. This is the story of a boycott by President Donald Trump that reveals deeper tensions, a refusal to engage that masks efforts to control the narrative on everything from climate action to economic fairness. Behind the public announcements lies the truth about why America is pulling away and what it really means for the rest of the world. This summit, the first ever on African soil, was meant to spotlight issues like debt relief for struggling nations and fair use of the continent's vast mineral resources, but Trump's decision has thrown it into disarray, exposing a secret push to reshape the G20 in ways that favor US interests above all else. The G20 began as a response to a major financial crisis in Asia back in the late 1990s. Finance ministers and central bank leaders from key economies came together in 1999 to tackle big-picture money problems and guide the world's economic path. Over time, their discussions grew to cover much more, including trade deals, efforts to fight climate shifts, ways to build lasting development, health improvements, farming advancements, energy supplies, environmental protections, and steps to root out corruption. Today, this group includes the planet's biggest players: Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, France, Germany, India, Indonesia, Italy, Japan, the Republic of Korea, Mexico, Russia, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Turkey, the United Kingdom, and the United States. The European Union and the African Union also hold spots in the forum, making it a powerhouse that accounts for 85% of the global economy and two-thirds of all people on Earth. This weekend's gathering in Johannesburg marks a historic moment, as it's the first time the summit has come to Africa. Experts point out that this shift highlights a change in how global talks are happening, moving away from the usual spots in wealthy capitals to places that represent the developing world. Following last year's event in Brazil, this year's focus builds on themes from the global south, emphasizing South Africa's role in bridging divides between richer and poorer nations. It's not just a symbol, it carries real political and economic weight, allowing Africa to push its needs onto the world stage and engage with major powers on equal footing. South Africa, as the host, sets the tone for the discussions. The theme revolves around solidarity, equality, and sustainability, with specific goals agreed upon through working groups that operate by everyone reaching a common understanding. Key priorities include making sure countries can handle their debts without collapsing, updating the global money systems to be fairer, taking strong steps against climate changes, and ensuring a smooth shift to cleaner energy sources. One standout issue is how to use critical minerals for growth that benefits everyone, especially in Africa. The continent holds huge reserves of these resources, but often they get shipped out raw and come back as expensive finished goods. This setup leaves African nations paying more for products made from their own materials, without gaining the full value. The push here is to keep more processing and benefits local, supporting development not just in Africa but across the global south. As the summit approaches, attention turns to the dramatic standoff between South Africa and the United States. President Donald Trump made headlines by declaring that no high-level US officials would attend, citing claims of unfair treatment toward Afrikaners in South Africa. This boycott, announced recently, has sparked questions about the real motives. Analysts suggest it might be less about those specific concerns and more about safeguarding America's leading position in world affairs, especially as challenges like China rise in influence. Trump has expressed clear dissatisfaction with South Africa, tying into broader frustrations with how the G20 is evolving beyond its original economic focus. Experts like Roland Henwood from the University of Pretoria's Department of Political Sciences have weighed in on the broader implications. He highlights how the G20 now addresses pressing challenges faced by billions, such as development hurdles, getting affordable funding for poorer countries, and linking economic management to real-world issues. Hosting in Johannesburg signals a break from the past, giving the Global South a stronger voice. Henwood notes the importance of this for Africa, following Brazil's turn last year, and sees it as a chance for South Africa to lead conversations on using local resources for inclusive progress, rather than letting them fuel growth elsewhere at a high cost to the origin countries. Adding to the criticism, economist Professor Jeffrey Sachs from Columbia University has called out Trump's boycott as a major setback for global cooperation and an even bigger mistake for America itself. He describes the move as irresponsible, warning that it isolates the US and weakens its sway on the world stage. Sachs, who has advised top United Nations leaders and governments in regions like Latin America, Europe, Asia, and Africa, stresses that the coming decades are pivotal for Africa's expansion. He compares it to Asia's fast growth, where that continent now holds 60% of the world's people compared to Africa's 18%. His view is that Africa needs a unified strategy for progress, including its own money system and perhaps a single currency to drive independence. Sachs also points to flaws in the African Union's slow, paperwork-heavy methods, which he says slow down real advancements. He argues against depending too much on old institutions like the International Monetary Fund and World Bank, which haven't fully solved Africa's ongoing issues. Instead, he looks to groups like BRICS, which are building their own financial tools to lessen reliance on the US dollar. This perspective ties into the summit's goals, urging a rethink of how global finance works to better support places like Africa. Tensions have only grown in recent days. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has stood firm, stating that his country won't be pushed around by Washington. He has made it clear that the handover of the G20 presidency won't go to a low-level diplomat like a Chargé d'affaires, emphasizing the need for proper representation. This comes amid back-and-forth communications where the US initially boycotted but then signaled some limited involvement, only to clarify that it would send embassy staff just for the ceremonial passing of the leadership role, not for full talks. The drama unfolded dramatically on Thursday. Ramaphosa, while meeting with European Union leaders at the Sandton Convention Center, announced that South Africa had received word from the United States about reconsidering its absence. He viewed it as a step forward, noting that staying out of discussions rarely leads to good outcomes.
The United States is a member of the G20. They are the original member of the G20, so they have the right to be here, and all we will be seeking to do is to look at the various practicalities, logistical and otherwise, for them to participate. We have received notice from the United States, a notice which we are still in discussions with them over, about a change of mind about participating in one shape, form or other in the summit. So the discussions are still ongoing. This comes really at the late hour before the summit begins, and so therefore we do need to engage in those types of discussions to see how practical it is and what it finally really means. In a way, we see this as a positive sign.
However, the Trump administration quickly pushed back, with White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt accusing Ramaphosa of spreading false information and speaking out against the US in ways that weren't welcome. She confirmed that only a consular team would handle the handover, not top officials engaging in the summit's core work.
Thank you. Two questions for you. The New York Times is reporting that the administration is now sending a U.S. official to the G20. They are sending Marc Dillard. Can you confirm if that is true, and then also explain the shift in?
I'd be happy to explain, because there is not a shift. The United States is not participating in official talks at the G20 in South Africa. I saw the South African president running his mouth a little bit against the United States and the president of the United States earlier today, and that language is not appreciated by the president or his team. The ambassador, or the representative of the embassy in South Africa, is simply there to recognize that the United States will be the host of the G20. They are receiving that send-off at the end of the event. They are not there to participate in official talks, despite what the South African president is falsely claiming.
South Africa's response was swift. Presidency spokesperson Vincent Magwenya took to social media to declare that Ramaphosa wouldn't pass the presidency to a deputy ambassador, underscoring the insult of such a low-key handover. This exchange highlights the strained ties, with International Relations Minister Ronald Lamola earlier stating that the world can move forward with or without American involvement. The US has even warned against issuing any joint statements from the summit without its full agreement, pushing for outcomes to be labeled as just the host's view rather than a group consensus. Behind this public spat lies what many see as the secret agenda, the US aiming to strip back the G20 to its economic roots, resisting expansions into areas like climate justice and inequality that recent hosts from the Global South have championed. Trump has criticized South Africa's priorities as going against American views, with officials like Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent talking about narrowing the forum's scope when the US takes over next year in Miami. They've complained about the G20 becoming too broad, inviting too many voices, and plan to refocus it on basics, showcasing American leadership. This contrasts sharply with South Africa's approach. Ramaphosa has framed the summit as one for the millions affected by global decisions, not just a club of the powerful. He's linked it to historical moments like the 1955 Bandung Conference, where the Global South first asserted itself, and South Africa's own Freedom Charter from the same year. The event aims to ground international cooperation in real experiences from civil society, youth, labor groups, women's movements, and more. Leading up to the leaders' meeting, the G20 Social Summit wrapped up on Thursday in Ekurhuleni, bringing together diverse groups at the Birchwood Hotel and OR Tambo Conference Center from November 18th to 20th. Deputy President Paul Mashatile opened with a strong emphasis on Africa's central role, saying the global system must align with the continent's needs, population, and growth potential. He placed issues like barriers to women's full participation at the core of development talks, calling for urgent action to enable equal involvement in society. Ramaphosa echoed this, declaring gender-based harm and attacks on women a national crisis in South Africa, with all partners committing to extreme measures to address it. Co-conveners like Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka and Khumbudzo Ntshavheni stressed viewing Africa through its assets, such as rich soils and key minerals, to influence worldwide talks on growth and green shifts. Discussions delved into digital access gaps, fair climate responses, strong supply chains, balanced energy changes, reforming money institutions, and linking UN goals with Africa's Agenda 2063 vision. Side sessions focused on women's economic roles, noting that they handle about 70% of unpaid care duties globally, and calling for real investments in support systems. The final declaration presented to Ramaphosa urged better social safety nets, equitable funding for development, broader help for adapting to climate impacts, and closing tech divides. Amid all this, the US boycott threatens to undermine these efforts. Trump has tied his decision to allegations of abuses against white farmers, including land grabs, calling it a shame for South Africa to host under such conditions. South Africa has strongly rejected these claims, pushing forward with plans to make the summit a platform for multilateralism and African leadership. The US has gone further, sending notes insisting that no full leaders' declaration can emerge without its input, even in absence, labeling any outcome as merely the chair's statement. This stance has drawn rebukes from South African officials. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Chrispin Phiri accused the US of trying to force its way through non-participation, warning that such tactics could paralyze the whole system. Ramaphosa has repeatedly said his nation won't bow to pressure, and in a press conference with EU leaders like Antonio Costa and Ursula von der Leyen, he giggled while noting the last-minute US shift, though details remain fuzzy. Daily Maverick reports have uncovered a letter from the U.S. Embassy requesting accreditation for Chargé d'Affaires Marc Dillard and 7 staff to join only the closing handover on Sunday, November 23. Ramaphosa acknowledged evolving communications, moving beyond just a deputy receiving the role, but stressed logistical challenges due to the late notice. With most leaders already arriving in Johannesburg, rearranging speaking orders and setups isn't simple. White House officials like Deputy Press Secretary Anna Kelly dismissed reports of a full U.S. return as untrue, while Leavitt reiterated no change in position and criticized Ramaphosa's words. This petty back and forth has turned the pre-summit buzz into a spectacle of taunts, reminiscent of Trump's past clashes at events like the BRICS summit in Brazil, where insults flew between him and host President Luiz Inacio Lula da Silva. At its core, this dispute reveals divisions threatening the G20's purpose. The U.S. opposes South Africa's push for stronger action on inequality, gender justice, and global teamwork, preferring to limit the agenda when it hosts next year. Ramaphosa has countered by saying the summit involves the G-million, involving people impacted by decisions, not just elites. Historically, the G20 has issued a communiqué each year, but last year's statement drew flack from Ukraine and its allies for not directly naming Russia's actions. This year, with the US absent, securing agreement becomes trickier, yet South Africa presses on, building on progress from Indonesia, India, and Brazil's presidencies. Former Finance Minister Trevor Manuel has raised concerns that South Africa might not get an invite to next year's Miami summit in retaliation. Meanwhile, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has labeled South Africa's themes as against American values. Bessent's comments about whittling down the G20 suggest a plan to exclude broader voices, focusing on a concentrated group under US guidance. Ramaphosa has mused about handing over to an empty chair, symbolically addressing Trump and passing the reins regardless. This resilience shows South Africa's determination to lead without being derailed. The summit at Nasrec, south of Johannesburg, will proceed with invited guests from 22 additional countries, aiming to champion debt sustainability, financial reforms, and a just shift from fossil fuels. Experts like Sachs urge Africa to forge its path, creating independent systems to avoid old traps. Henwood emphasizes the economic upside of local mineral processing, turning raw wealth into engines for growth. The social summit's outcomes, with calls for fairer finance and climate support, reflect a groundswell from communities demanding change. As the leaders convene tomorrow, the boycott's shadow looms, but it also spotlights the US's hidden aim to curb the G20's scope, resisting calls for equality that empower emerging powers. Trump's move, framed around Africana issues, appears part of a larger strategy to maintain dominance amid challenges from China and others. By skipping Johannesburg, America risks losing ground as the global South asserts itself more forcefully. This tale of high-stakes diplomacy uncovers how power struggles shape our world, from mineral riches in African soil to boardrooms deciding global fates. It's a reminder that behind every summit lie agendas not always spoken aloud, where one nation's boycott can reveal truths about inequality in the international order. What are your thoughts on whether Trump's boycott will truly weaken America's global standing or if it's a clever move to reset the G20? Share in the comments and let's discuss how this could change the future of international cooperation. Thanks for watching this news bulletin. Please share your opinion in the comments section. We would be glad to read and respond to your comments. Let's meet again tomorrow in our next strange story. Wishing you an exciting and adventurous weekend.